Mother-in-law erased my entire family from my wedding with fake invitations. So I made her stand outside in 110-degree heat while the real ceremony waited. The gates were padlocked. I could see them from across the parking lot, 100 people in silk gowns and tailored suits, standing on scorching asphalt, fanning themselves with their clutch bags, squinting into the brutal afternoon sun. And right in the center of that sweating, furious crowd was my mother-in-law, Margaret, in her $4,500 champagne Vera Wang, her perfectly set hair slowly wilting in the heat. My phone buzzed in my hand. Her name lit up the screen for the 7th time. I put it face down on the dressing table, picked up my lipstick, and smiled at myself in the mirror. Let me take you back to the beginning, because if I just told you what I did, you'd probably think I was the villain of this story. And I need you to understand, with every single cell in my body, that I am not. My name is Elsa. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above my uncle's hardware store in a small Rust Belt town where people knew your name, brought you soup when you were sick, and showed up to everything, funerals, birthdays, Tuesday dinners, because that's what family does. We didn't have money, but we had something money has never once been able to buy, and that's the kind of love that actually shows up. Daniel had money. Daniel's family had generational money, the kind with a family crest and a summer house in Maine and opinions about which country clubs were worth belonging to. Daniel himself was nothing like that. He was warm and funny, and he drove 40 minutes every Sunday to have breakfast with my mom just because she made good coffee and he liked the way she laughed. He was the kind of man that made you believe in people again. His mother, Margaret, was the kind of woman that made you stop. The first time I met her, she looked at my hands. Not my face, my hands. And then she smiled, the specific smile of someone who has already decided everything about you and is simply waiting for you to confirm it. She had the posture of a woman who had never once stood in a grocery store checkout line, and the voice of someone who had spent decades speaking in rooms where everyone listened simply because she was the one speaking. She did not like me. She was not subtle about it. At Daniel's birthday dinner, 8 months into our relationship, she called my hometown quaint the way people say the word unfortunate. She asked what my father did. I told her he'd worked in manufacturing his whole life until the plant closed, and now he drove for a logistics company. She nodded slowly, the way a doctor nods when the test results are worse than expected. How industrious, she said. Daniel squeezed my knee under the table. I smiled so hard my back teeth hurt. When Daniel proposed, in my mom's kitchen, on a random Wednesday, with her cheap sparkling wine and my cousin filming it sideways on his phone, I cried for 20 minutes straight. It was perfect. It was us. And in the back of my mind, even on the happiest night of my life, I already knew Margaret was going to be a problem. I had no idea how big of a problem. Wedding planning with Margaret was its own particular kind of warfare. She had opinions about everything: the venue, too casual; the menu, too ethnic; the flowers, too wild; the guest list, too large. That last one was the battleground we kept returning to. My family is big. I have 3 aunts, 2 uncles, 11 cousins, and a web of family friends who've been around since before I was born. These were the people at every Christmas, every graduation, every hard moment and every celebration. I wasn't getting married without them in the room. Margaret felt differently. A wedding is a curated experience, Elsa, she told me over lunch one afternoon, setting down her fork like she was making a legal argument. Every face in that room tells a story about who you are as a couple. I looked at her across the table and said, very calmly, then my family needs to be there, because they're the story of who I am. She smiled that smile again. She pushed Daniel about it constantly. I know, because Daniel told me, looking exhausted and frustrated, that she kept framing my family as a logistical concern. Too many people, too much noise. She wanted a refined ceremony. She'd actually used the phrase social aesthetics in a conversation with her son about my Aunt Linda, who teaches 3rd grade and makes the best peach cobbler I have ever eaten in my life. I told Daniel I wasn't budging. He backed me up completely. My family was on the guest list, full stop, non-negotiable. What I didn't know was that Margaret had simply decided to handle it herself. About 2 months before the wedding, we were knee-deep in logistics. Invitations were designed, printed, stuffed, and sitting in boxes in our spare room, waiting to be mailed. Physical invitations, because my mom had made a comment once about how she still had my grandmother's wedding invitation in a box somewhere and how beautiful that was. And I'd decided right then that our guests were getting real paper in their hands. Margaret called out of nowhere, which, in hindsight, I should have clocked immediately, because Margaret didn't do things out of nowhere and offered to handle mailing the invitations to save us money and time. She said she had a postage account through her business and it would cost us nothing. She's trying, Daniel said, hopefully. I said okay. I had 1,000 other things to deal with. The caterer had just changed their minimum, the alterations on my dress were running behind, and I was working full-time through all of it. I handed her the invitation list sorted by address and I thanked her. I did not think about it again for 6 weeks. The moment everything changed started with a text from my cousin Brianna. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my robe with a mug of coffee, looking at seating chart drafts, when my phone buzzed. Hey, got our invite. She'd sent a photo, white envelope, our names on the front, a little wax seal, it looked beautiful. And then she sent a second photo. The card itself, I almost didn't catch it, but something made me zoom in. Some tiny, crawling feeling at the back of my neck. I zoomed in on the bottom of the card. Ceremony begins at 6 p.m. I put my coffee down. Our ceremony was at 2 p.m. Every vendor, every contract, every document we had said 2 p.m. I had said 2 p.m. to every person I'd invited. The invitations we had printed, our invitations, said 2 p.m. I went to the spare room. I found the box we'd kept as our personal copies. I pulled one out and stared at it. 2 p.m. I texted Brianna back. Can you take a closer look at that invitation? Like the paper quality, the font, does anything look slightly different? She called me instead of texting. Elsa, what's going on? Just, humor me. Look at it closely. A pause. Then, the font on this one is like, a little thinner? And the paper feels different. Ours is kind of matte. The one we have is shinier. I sat down on the floor of my spare room. She had printed a second batch. Margaret had taken our invitation list, separated out every single one of my family members, had a second set of invitations printed with the wrong time, and mailed them out. 64 people. My mother, my father, my aunts and uncles and cousins and the woman who'd been my mom's best friend since 1987 and had driven 8 hours to be at my graduation. Every person on my side of the family had received a card that would guarantee they arrived 4 hours after the ceremony ended. My hands had gone completely still. That's the thing about certain kinds of shock, it doesn't make you shake. It turns you to stone. Brianna, I said, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not freak out. Here's where I want to stop and be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. Sitting on the floor of my spare room with the real invitation in one hand and my phone in the other. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I've cried at commercials, at dog videos, at the end of mediocre rom-coms. But sitting there, understanding fully and completely what Margaret had done, that she had looked at the people who raised me, who loved me, who would have driven through a hurricane to watch me get married, and had decided to simply erase them from the ceremony with a fake piece of paper and a postage account, I didn't cry. I felt something go very, very quiet inside me. I called Daniel. His voice on the phone went from sleepy to confused to something I'd never heard from him before, this low, controlled kind of fury that was somehow scarier than yelling. Send me the picture, he said. I did. Silence. Elsa. His voice cracked, just slightly. I am so sorry. Don't be sorry, I said. I need to know if you're with me, because I'm about to do something, and I need to know you're completely with me. Another silence. Then, tell me what you need. Wait, because what I did next is the part that made this post go absolutely nuclear. I did not call Margaret. I did not text Daniel's father. I did not post about it. I did not vent to anyone except Brianna and Daniel. I did not give Margaret a single second of warning. Instead, I picked up my phone, and I called our venue coordinator. Her name was Priya, and she was an absolute professional, and I want to say for the record that she handled what I told her with remarkable composure. Priya, I said, I need to move the wedding. A beat. Move it to a different date? No. Same date. Same everything. I need to move the start time from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Ceremony at 6. Reception to follow. Elsa, that's a significant change, and some vendors. I'll handle every vendor personally. I'll call them all today. I'll cover any change fees out of pocket if I have to. This is not optional. Can you make it work? She could sense something in my voice, I think, because she didn't push back again. Let me check the availability on our end and call you back in 20 minutes. She called back in 15. It was doable. The venue had no other bookings that day after 5 p.m. I then called our caterer, our photographer, our florist, and our band. I told each of them there'd been an unavoidable time change, that I was deeply sorry for the inconvenience, and that I would personally cover any adjustment costs. 2 of them didn't charge me anything extra. The photographer said she actually preferred preferred the later light. Within 5 hours, every single contract had been updated. Our wedding was now officially, legally, and completely at 6 p.m. And then I texted Brianna, "Tell everyone on our side to arrive at 5:30, not 6, 5:30, and do not tell them why. Just say it's from me and I need them there early." Brianna, who had known me since we were in diapers and could read my energy through a text message, replied instantly, "Oh my God, what did you do?" "Trust me," I sent back, "just make the calls. I want to tell you about the 48 hours before the wedding, because I think people assume pulling off something like this is all cold strategy and adrenaline. It's not. It's 48 hours of looking at the man you love and asking yourself, over and over again, if you're doing the right thing." Daniel and I talked about it for hours that first night. He was furious at his mother, genuinely, deeply furious, in a way I hadn't seen before. But he was also grieving something, I think. The version of his mother he'd wanted to believe in. The possibility that she'd been trying, even a little. "She looked at your family," he said, staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, "and she decided they weren't worth being there. That you weren't worth the family you came from." He turned his head to look at me. "She's going to lose her mind," he said. "I know. And you're okay with that?" I thought about my dad, who'd been talking about my wedding since I was 7 years old. I thought about my mom, who'd cried when I showed her my dress. I thought about Aunt Linda, who had taken 3 days off work to come from out of state. I thought about Brianna, filming the proposal sideways on her phone. "She made her choice," I said. "Now she gets to live with mine." We didn't tell anyone on his side. Not his father, not his siblings, not one single guest. As far as every person Margaret had mailed an invitation to was concerned, the wedding was at 2 p.m. We also didn't cancel those invitations. We didn't send a correction. We just let the time change sit quietly in the updated vendor contracts and the venue booking and a completely rearranged schedule, and we let the world spin. The morning of the wedding, I was up at 7. I did my hair and makeup with my mom and Brianna and 2 of my closest cousins crammed into a hotel room that smelled like dry shampoo and coffee. My mom kept tearing up every 20 minutes and then laughing at herself for it. Brianna made a playlist. My cousin Marcus tried to apply his girlfriend's mascara and managed to stab himself in the eye. It was loud and chaotic and full of love, and it was exactly how the morning of my wedding was supposed to feel. At 11:45 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Gretchen Harlow, a family friend of the Harlow family. I'm at the venue for the 2 p.m. wedding and the gates appear to be locked. Is there an alternate entrance?" I showed it to Brianna. She pressed both hands over her mouth. I replied politely that the venue gates would be open for guests beginning at 5:30 p.m., as stated in the updated booking, and wished her a lovely afternoon. Then my actual phone, the main line, started ringing. "Margaret." I let it go to voicemail. Then again, then a third time. On the 4th call, I picked up. "Elsa." Her voice was not the polished, managed tone I was used to. It was raw and rattling and furious. "The gates are locked. We are all standing in the parking lot. What is going on? There are people here in formal wear. It is 97 degrees. "Margaret," I said, very calmly, "the wedding starts at 6. It says so on the invitations." A silence so sharp it had edges. "The invitations I have say 2 o'clock. "Well," I said, "that's interesting, because the invitations you send out say 6. And those are the ones the vendors are working from. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, they all have 6 o'clock in their systems. So I'm not sure what to tell you." "You moved it." Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "You moved the entire wedding." "I adjusted the schedule based on some new information I received," I said. "You're welcome to wait in the parking lot. The gates open at 5:30. I hung up. I put my phone face down on the dressing table. I picked up my lipstick, and I smiled at myself in the mirror. My family arrived at 5:28 p.m., a stampede of color and noise and people talking over each other. My dad in a suit he'd clearly bought specifically for this day and carefully pressed himself. My Aunt Linda already misty-eyed before she'd even walked through the gates. Marcus with a small bruise forming on his eyelid from the mascara incident. They flooded into the venue like a wave, loud and warm and completely, entirely there. The Harlow family and their guests arrived at 5:45, sunburned and shell-shocked, some of them having spent 4 full hours in a parking lot in formal wear in 97-degree heat. Margaret walked through the gates looking like a woman who had survived a small natural disaster. Her champagne gown had a sweat stain at the back. Her hair had lost the battle with the humidity pretty. She said nothing when she passed me in the foyer. She looked at me with an expression I will probably carry for the rest of my life. Not anger, exactly. Something closer to the specific devastation of realizing you have underestimated someone completely and permanently. I smiled at her. A real smile, not her smile, mine. You look wonderful, I said. She walked past me without a word. The ceremony started at 6:15, 15 minutes late because my dad cried so hard during the processional that we had to pause while Brianna produced a travel packet of tissues from her bra. The golden hour light was extraordinary. Our photographer later told me it was the best light she'd ever worked in at that venue. The photos looked like something out of a film, warm and amber and full of the kind of joy that only happens when the right people are in the room. My whole family was in every single photo. My mom, my dad, my aunts and uncles and cousins and the woman who'd been my mom's best friend since 1987. Every single one of them, right there, in every frame, permanent and undeniable. Daniel cried when he saw me walking toward him. He cried so hard his best man had to hand him a handkerchief. You did it, he whispered when I reached him. We did it, I said back. Margaret has not spoken to me since the wedding. She sent Daniel a long email that he summarized for me in 3 words. She's very upset. He sent her back an email of his own that I was not permitted to read in full, but whose subject line was what you did to Elsa's family, and from the pieces he shared with me, I understand it was thorough. There has been no apology. I don't expect one. I have stopped expecting things from Margaret that she is constitutionally incapable of giving. What I have instead is a memory of my dad, standing in golden afternoon light, watching me walk toward the man I was choosing, in a room full of every person who had ever chosen me, and the look on his face. Pure, uncontained, embarrassing amounts of pride. Margaret wanted to erase my family from my wedding. She spent money and time and considerable cunning printing fake invitations and sorting addresses and mailing lies, all to make sure the people who built me would not be there to watch me begin the next chapter of my life. She failed. They were there for every second of it. And the photos are beautiful. So I'll leave it to you. You've heard the whole story now. Every piece of it. From the fake invitations to the padlocked gates to 4 hours on the scorching asphalt. You know what she did. You know what I did. Was I wrong to not confront her the moment I found out? Should I have given her the chance to confess, to apologize, to fix it? Or did someone who would go to that length to erase my family from my wedding forfeit her right to a warning? Tell me, because I genuinely want to know, was this the revenge of a woman pushed past her limit, or did Margaret finally meet the consequence she'd been engineering for herself all along?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.